Hey YouTube, it's Wade from Everyday Sustainable. I know with COVID vaccines rolling out and the year we just had, many of us are planning to get outside this season. And that's what makes it even more important that we brush up on these leave no trace principles. The more people who go visit an area, the more impact we have. We can minimize that impact by brushing up on these principles and taking them seriously. So whether you're somebody like me who likes backpacking in the backcountry, or you prefer staying on the paved roads in the national parks, or even if you don't like the great outdoors, you'll get something out of this video, because there's something to be gleaned out of these principles for everybody. Let's get to it. Leave No Trace has 7 well-established principles. They were originally designed to apply to backpacking and camping, but they've been expanded to apply to all recreational activities and local parks as well. Because these principles are well established, there's a number of articles that discusses them, each with their own points of emphasis. I've linked to a number in the description down below. We're going to talk about all 7 of these principles, what they mean, why they're important, and I'm going to connect them broadly to our everyday lives as well, because I think they're relevant. The first one of these principles is to prepare and plan ahead. This one's important because it lays the foundation for all of the others, and it allows you to avoid emergencies and waste. For example, if you bring the right amount of gear, you won't have to start an illegal fire to stay warm. By not bringing too much gear, you can avoid the temptation of leaving some behind or littering. To give you a specific example of this, I once heard the story of somebody who was trying to train, so he brought a weight in his backpack as he climbed Half Dome. This person couldn't handle carrying the weight, so they left the weight behind in the park. Horrible, illegal, and you should never put yourself in that situation. So make sure you plan properly, bring the right gear, know where you're going, bring a map and a compass. These can all help keep you out of trouble and help minimize your impact. Connecting this first principle to our everyday lives is quite simple. Planning and preparing ahead can reduce waste. Whether it's bringing our reusable bags to grocery stores or our reusable utensils to restaurants, or planning out our meals so we have less food waste, or planning out our days so that we drive less, all great ways to leave no trace in our everyday lives. The second principle is to travel and camp on durable surfaces. To put this simply, good campsites are found, not made. Camp where other people have already camped, walk on the trails that are established. Avoid things that are called social trails, which are basically shortcuts, a time when a number of people have decided to cut the trail off at the corner and wear another unestablished, unofficial trail into the side of the mountain. These cause erosion, can kill plants and wildlife, and destroy the borders of the established trails. Avoid social trails. And this applies directly to our everyday lives. How often have you seen people cut corners in your everyday lives? And how often does that create a pattern of cutting those corners? A kind of everybody does it mentality. Whether it's a small thing like littering, or a larger thing like when Trump was blasting the Green New Deal and he famously said,
"No other country except us is going to do it." That's a little problem too.
It's this kind of social trail mentality. Nobody else is caring for the environment, so why should we? Everybody else is littering, so why shouldn't I? Don't fall prey to these social trails ways of thinking. This kind of everybody does it mentality. We're better than that. Right, Trump? The third leave no trace principle is to dispose of waste properly. What this means simply is pack it in, pack it out. You can make following this principle easier simply by packing less, which goes back to the first principle of preparing properly. Of course, you don't want to bring too little because that can get you in trouble as well, but by packing the appropriate amount. And repackaging things using reusable items so there's less trash to begin with. If you're doing backcountry trips, this means toilet paper as well. Pack it in, pack it out. So be sure to have a bag for you to put that dirty toilet paper in so you're not tempted to leave it behind. It can also help if you bring a trowel like this one with you so that you properly dig what's called the cat hole for your human waste, and you can cover that and it won't affect the wildlife or other backpackers. This season, I'm also going to be trying out one of these travel bidets that you put on top of a water bottle and use like a bidet. So you can bring less toilet paper, use less toilet paper, which is a good thing in general, but it also means you're carrying less weight, you have less waste. Another great way to lower your impact. I'll have links to both of these items in the description down below if you're interested. Not everybody's going to use a travel bidet, and not everybody goes on these backcountry trips. So connecting this third principle to our everyday lives, I think quite simply, it's reducing our waste. If you want to learn more about this and the other R's, reuse, recycle, repair, I have a video where I talked about this a bit. You can check that out. But also, simply don't litter. Dispose of things in the proper bins, and where you can, reduce your waste by buying in bulk and reducing your consumption in general. The fourth principle is the inverse of the last one. Leave what you find. This one's often overlooked. If you see a rock or a stick or a shell that you like, don't take it with you. Just take a photo of it. Leave it in place. And also, don't move things around to build structures or anything along those lines. Taking items and moving them and building structures can really have seriously damaging effects on the ecosystems. You may think it's no big deal because it's just you, but these things have a cumulative effect. Again, thousands of people go to these parks, and this summer especially will be extra busy. Leave things in place, take a photo, not a rock. Applying this principle to our everyday lives is a little more theoretical. I think to keep it simple, it's about realizing that our actions have impacts, even little ones. You may think it's just a small rock, but it can have huge impacts if everybody does it. So let's not cut corners, let's leave things in place, let's not take things we don't need. The fifth leave no trace principle is to minimize campfire impact. I mentioned this earlier, but always use established fire rings, never create a new one. Never create a fire when they're not allowed or in places where they're not allowed. Always make sure your campfires are completely smothered and extinguished. The line between the outdoors and our everyday lives on this one is really blurry, especially living in California where there's record-breaking wildfires every year. And not all these wildfires are started by campers. We've all heard the stories of the gender reveal party that started a wildfire, or the downed electrical line, or the appliance that was left on. We must be aware of the way our actions can have a huge effect. Even though some of these fires are caused by silly things like a gender reveal party, they're exaggerated and worsened because of our changing climate. The season is drier, there's less rain in general, so when a fire is started, they're harder to put out and they burn more area. These wildfires release more carbon into the air, they displace thousands of people, burn millions of acres, and obviously make the air quality worse. There's new research that shows that wildfire smoke is one of the worst kinds of air pollution for our respiratory system. It is of the utmost importance that we practice proper fire safety, whether we're in the backcountry or we're in our homes. The sixth leave no trace principle is to respect wildlife. Let the wildlife be wild. Never feed them, never get too close to them, take photos from a distance. Remember that you're in their home. Show them respect. Connecting this to our everyday lives, I think is maybe a little difficult for us because so much of our lives have been paved over. It's hard to even think about wildlife in our cities sometimes. But maybe that's a helpful question. How different would our cities be if we were aware of wildlife and we respected it? We would likely develop differently, and less, our cities would look quite different. Perhaps the important lesson here is for us to push back on the dichotomy between nature and the city. Everywhere we go is a part of the natural world after all. It's easy to think about nature as a place we go to, up in the mountains or to the beach. But the reality is you're in it now. We've just paved over so much of it that it's hard to see. Push back against that dichotomy in your life. Notice the wildlife that is there and respect it as best as you can. The seventh and final leave no trace principle is to respect other visitors. Keep noise to a minimum, travel in small groups when you can, don't cause unneeded traffic or congestion. Nobody wants to hear your music, keep the volume down, do what you can to respect other people. Connecting this one to our everyday lives is quite simple, really. Could you imagine how different the world would be if we respected others? I don't believe the climate crisis would be nearly as bad as it is if we thought about other people. If each country thought about how their actions affected other countries. Or further, if we thought about how our actions would affect future generations. Imagine if we lived in a world where we cared about other people and future generations and not just ourselves and profits. On that note, if you go outdoors, enjoy them and practice these principles so that you leave no trace and leave places better than the way you found them. May we be better citizens of the world today and every day. See you in the next one.